Hello children, your teacher Grania here. So today I promised to read you Mr. Happy and I have it here. So I'm going to start. Mr. Happy, the third story in our series. On the other side of the world, where the sun shines hotter than here and where the trees are 100 feet tall, there is a country called Happy Land. As you might very well expect, everybody who lives in Happy Land is as happy as the day is long. Wherever you go, you see smiling faces all around. It's such a happy place that even the flowers seem to smile in Happy Land. And as well as all the people being happy, all the animals in Happy Land are happy too. And if you've never seen a mouse smile, or a cat, or a dog, or even a worm, go to Happy Land. There's a worm smiling. I've never seen a worm smile. This is the story about someone who lived there who happened to be called Mr. Happy. Mr. Happy was fat and round and happy. There he is. And what colour is he? He's yellow, you're right. And he's shaped like a triangle? No. Square? No. Rectangle? No. Circle? Yes, you're right. Well done. He's shaped like a yellow circle. He lived in a small cottage beside a lake at the foot of a mountain and close to a wood in Happy Land. There's his house. One day while Mr. Happy was out walking through the tall trees in those woods near his home, he came across something which was really rather extraordinary. There he is hiding, can you see him? He's just down there, behind the trees. There in the trunk of one of the very tall trees was a door. Not a very large door, but nevertheless a door. Certainly a door. A small, narrow, yellow door. Definitely a door. I wonder who lives here, thought Mr. Happy to himself, and he turned the handle of that small, narrow, yellow door. The door wasn't locked, and it swung open quite easily. Who do you think lives in there? It could be a squirrel. It could be a hedgehog. It could be a family of spiders. Let's see. Just inside the small, narrow yellow door was a small, narrow, winding staircase leading downwards. Mr. Happy squeezed his rather large body through the rather thin doorway and began to walk down the stairs. The stairs went round and round and down and down and round and down and down and round. He's walking in a circle. I hope he doesn't get dizzy and fall and hurt himself. Eventually, after a long time, Mr. Happy reached the bottom of the staircase. He looked around and saw there in front of him another small, narrow door, but this one was red. There it is, and there's a mat in front of the door, a green mat. I wonder if there's somebody inside. Let's see. Mr. Happy knocked at the door. Who's there? Said a voice. A sad, squeaky sort of voice. Who's there? Mr. Happy pushed open the red door slowly, and there, sitting on a stool, was somebody who looked exactly like Mr. Happy, except that he didn't look happy at all. In fact, he looked downright miserable. Oh no. That's not very nice feeling like that. I hope Mr. Happy cheers him up. Hello, said Mr. Happy. I'm Mr. Happy. Oh, are you indeed? Sniffed the person who looked like Mr. Happy but wasn't. Well, my name is Mr. Miserable, and I am the most miserable person in the whole world. "Why are you so miserable?" asked Mr. Happy. "Because I am," said Mr. Miserable. There's Mr. Happy. He's smiling. And there's Mr. Miserable. He's very sad. "How would you like to be happy like me?" asked Mr. Happy. "I'd give anything to be happy," said Mr. Miserable. "But I'm so miserable, I don't think I could ever be happy," he added miserably. Mr. Happy made up his mind quickly. "Follow me," he said. "Where to?" asked Mr. Miserable. "Don't argue," said Mr. Happy, and he went out through the small, narrow, red door. There he is. I wonder where they're going. Maybe they're going to go to the park. Maybe ride scooters or bikes, or maybe climb trees. And then Mr. Miserable won't be sad anymore. He'll be having fun. Mr. Miserable hesitated and then followed. Up and up the winding staircase they went, up and round, and up and round and up, until they came out into the wood. "Follow me," said Mr. Happy again, and they both set off through the wood back to Mr. Happy's cottage. They're going to where he lives. That's a great idea. Mr. Miserable stayed in Mr. Happy's cottage for quite some time, and during that time the most remarkable thing happened. Because he was living in Happyland, Mr. Miserable ever so slowly stopped being miserable and started to be happy. His mouth stopped turning down at the corners. Look, he's not sad anymore. And ever so slowly it started turning up at the corners. Look, he's beginning to smile. And eventually, Mr. Miserable did something that he'd never done in the whole of his life. He smiled, and then he chuckled, which turned into a giggle, which became a laugh. A big, booming, hearty, huge, giant, large, enormous laugh. And Mr. Happy was so surprised that he started to laugh as well. And both of them laughed and laughed. They laughed until their sides hurt and their eyes watered. That is so nice. Mr. Happy really cheered him up. Mr. Miserable and Mr. Happy laughed and laughed and laughed. They went outside and they still laughed. And because they were laughing so much, everybody who saw them started laughing as well. Even the birds in the trees started to laugh at the thought of somebody called Mr. Miserable who just couldn't stop laughing. That is so lovely. And that's really the end of the story, except to say that if you ever feel as miserable as Mr. Miserable used to, you know exactly what to do, don't you? Just turn your mouth up at the corners. Go on. And that's the end of our story today. And tomorrow it will be Mr. Nosy.